Quickly in news this month, the Freedom from Religion Foundation is suing Montgomery County, Texas court Judge Wayne Mack for an opening ceremony that includes prayer. When Mack began as a judge in 2014, he started a volunteer chaplaincy program for religious leaders of all faiths to lead the courtroom in prayer at the start of the day. In the lawsuit, a non-religious lawyer, using the pseudonym John Rowe, argues he feels pressured to bow his head during the prayer and stay in the room for fear that refusing to do so or leaving might impact the outcome of his client's case. This is the second time that FFRF has sued this judge. You guys happen to know anything about this?
Yeah, this is the second time we've sued Judge Mack. The first case got tangled up in a bunch of weird procedure and immunity issues. So those have all been solved with the second filing here. But yeah, this is a judge in a courtroom in Texas that, when everybody's sitting in the courtroom, has a prayer before the opening gavel. And I mean, that very clearly communicates to anybody who's not a Christian that they're second-class citizens in that courtroom. And this is a place of justice.
And it's not only that. These chaplains come in to give the prayer, and they say, if you don't want to participate, you're free to leave. But they lock the doors, so anyone in the courtroom who does that is singled out and noticed as the person who doesn't want to pray. And then you have to bang on the door to get back in again. So one of the plaintiffs regularly participates in that courtroom and does not want to be identified because it might prejudice against his client in the courtroom. So he's kind of stuck. This is being imposed on him and on everybody, whether they want it or not.
And it's deciding legal cases in a court. It's one thing to have it at the beginning of a city council where you rightly might feel the same way, like your voice might not be heard if you're identified as the one who didn't stand up for the prayer at the city council. But this is the future of folks' lives, and maybe in court this is going on. So ugly stuff. You see this is probably as part of that same conspiracy.
Well, and it goes back to the prayer that Dan was mentioning. Jacob Duché's prayer is the reason that government prayer was upheld by the Supreme Court in 1983 in the first place. Prayers at city councils and state legislatures was upheld because of this supposed long history dating back to Jacob Duché. It's the Supreme Court actually using bad history and Christian nationalism to validate a violation of the First Amendment.
In New York City, the American Atheist Legal Center has written several letters to city officials to find out why the Catholic Church has received special treatment from the police. Events were recently held at the Co-Cathedral of St. Joseph, and local police blocked off parking on nearby streets with a sign indicating that vehicles remaining on the street would be relocated to a nearby street by the NYPD's parking detail. The letters include open records requests for details about the street closures and communications between the government and church officials. This is probably a fairly common problem in cities that are full of Catholics. What do you think about this one, Dan?
Well, you sometimes have traffic control when there's a big church meeting. My dad was a police officer in Anaheim, California, and sometimes they would show up to direct, because sometimes there is a kind of a good public secular reason for a good traffic flow into an event. But I've never heard of them actually moving cars off the street. That seems like way over the top. That seems like it's favoring religion.
Yeah, and we actually have stopped violations similar to this elsewhere, where the city's parking authority is favoring churches, and so the violations certainly can be stopped. But New York City has a pretty big problem with what we refer to them as religious accommodations in the law. And this is where when there's a burden on somebody's religion, the government can alleviate that burden in some instances, specifically when the government is the one imposing that burden on them. So, for instance, when government throws somebody in jail, we've decided as a country that we want to still let that person worship in certain ways. So the government can provide certain things to accommodate that prisoner's religion. What you see in New York City is religious accommodation run rampant, into the point where it's actually violating the separation of state and church. And this is one more example of that. We have been butting heads with de Blasio and before him Bloomberg over a number of these for about a decade. Pretty much my whole time at FFRF, I've written at least one or two letters every year about different religious accommodations run amok.
Are they historically the police and the firemen and the Catholic Church are
and things like that,
and connected in these cities, Boston, Milwaukee, Chicago?
Oh yeah, but we also see. I mean, it's not just Catholicism, Judaism. I mean, if you look at the outbreaks that we're seeing, they're tied to religious accommodations for getting your vaccinations as a kid. And we also see them. There's a holiday called Kaparat. Well, it's not the holiday. It's a holiday practice where you slaughter chickens in Orthodox Judaism. You swing the chicken around your head 3 times to transfer your sins to the chicken while you're chanting, and then you kill the chicken so that your sins die.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, and they slaughter upwards of 50,000 chickens every year in the streets of New York, and the health issues and the code violations are extensive, and they're massive, and there's blood in the streets, and they're basically torturing these animals, and the city won't do anything to enforce the code against it because it's a religious practice. It's another example. So I've written about this. If I'm Free Thought Now, FFRF's blog, I've written about this a couple different times if people want more information.
So if I own a whole bunch of chickens, can I commit a whole lot of sins then?
Yeah,
because I have
and
all these.
If you don't sin, then those chickens die for nothing. Just like
that's right. That's true.
But do they make a nice chicken soup afterwards? Is what
and this is actually one of the issues because they a lot of times they just throw them in the trash. They're supposed to donate them to homeless shelters and things like that, but they often PETA, the animal activist group, is really upset about this for PETA reasons. We're upset about it for violations of the Constitution.
You don't care about the chickens.
I mean, I would rather they not just slaughter them for no reason.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Nice chicken curry. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do, right?
Well,
One prayer, and it's kosher.
Give them to Chick-fil-A, I think.
I don't know if they would accept those. It's a Christian organization.
There's no way they'd turn back Jewish chickens, dead, murdered Jewish chickens. It's awful. What's a co-cathedral, too? Have you ever heard of that?
A what?
A co-cathedral. It says it's the co-cathedral of St. Joseph.
Oh, co-cathedral?
Yeah, it's not.
It's probably a smaller building than the main one.
2. New York has 2 official cathedrals. I don't know. I thought that was strange. The University of Kent in the UK has released a report indicating those who purport not to believe in any organized religion accepted some supernatural sentiments. The study was from the Understanding Unbelief Project and pooled responses from non-believers in the UK, US, Japan, Brazil, Denmark, and China. Respondents from Japan tended to be the least supernaturally inclined, while those from China and Brazil believed in them the most. This is the other woo, the atheists who sort of believe that crystals have. Is that what do you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same here. About a quarter of the country is non-religious, but only about 7% of the country considers themselves atheist or agnostic. It's the same sort of thing. Rejecting organized religion doesn't necessarily mean rejecting a belief in God. But I mean, there are still more atheists and agnostics than there are Hindus, Jews, Buddhists, Muslims, and Jehovah's Witnesses combined. So we are a very sizable minority, and if you want to talk about us as the nuns, we are the biggest in the country, outstripping Catholics and evangelicals now.
So in your mind, as a demographic, as a voting demographic, we need to embrace those people.
Oh, absolutely. And I do see the nuns, NONES, are coalescing as a voting demographic. And you started to see it in the 2016 election. It was just 538 was just looked at non-religious Americans, Democrats, and their support for various candidates. It's becoming more and more of an issue. And I think politicians are recognizing more and more that there is this group out there that has been ignored. And if you were to extend a hand to them, you could easily win an election. I mean, you're talking about 25 to 30% of the population.
Who are you looking at in 2020?
FFRF is a nonpartisan organization.
I didn't ask what FFRF was looking at.
Yeah.
Well, we're representing FFRF here, so.
How were you raised? Just quickly, Seidel strikes me as vaguely Jewish sounding. Were you raised atheist, or?
I was. My mom encouraged me to go to temple with my Jewish friends. Apparently, after I went to my first bar mitzvah, I said I wanted to convert to Judaism because I had so much fun at the party.
Yeah, well, why not?
Yeah, but I remember going to mass with a Catholic friend and church occasionally on Christmas and Easter with friends. And it became very clear to me very early on that the mutually exclusive truth claims, the best option was that they were all false. Nobody had a good reason for saying their truth was more accurate than anybody else. So they're all wrong.
So it sounds like your parents let you educate yourself and make your own decisions rather than steer you towards any dogma. Awesome. Give us a tagline once, if you would.
My name is Andrew Seidel. I am the Director of Strategic Response at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and I ride the Atheist Underground.
My name is Dan Barker. I'm co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and I ride the Atheist Underground.
Perfect. He's practiced at that, isn't he? That's awesome. All right, man. You're done.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate you making time for it.